Just as a little prompt, we may be coming into this wonderful restorative place later if we have some time. This is what it looks like. If you've got a bolster or rolled up blanket, that can be helpful. We can also modify. With a 60-minute session, it's quite a short session, so we'll just see how it goes. But if you have this equipment at home, the idea is that you have something to lie on, something to go underneath the buttocks. Hi, Amanda. But we'll see how it goes, because I've got quite a lot that I could put into this session, but I don't know if we'll have time. So we're going to start on our backs, and I'll just remove all these bits and pieces. So today's session is based on another one of the obstacles, the KLESAS. And this klesha that we're dealing with tonight is called Ragah, and that is translated, because that's in Sanskrit, to attachment. So attachments. And as an obstacle to our practice, just coming onto your backs in semi-supine, it will include attachments to experiences, to maybe joyful experiences that we assume we can replicate, that we become quite attached to, attachment to material possessions, attachments to people. So we can get attached to numerous things, and those attachments, just noticing how your body feels, the attachments can bind us to rely on external validation, external experiences that can essentially prevent us from moving towards freedom or moksha or liberation, jivamukta, which is what we're looking for in yoga. So we're trying to relinquish ourselves from that sense of being bound to an object, and that is our attachment, our Ragah. So coming into semi-supine tonight, allowing for the spine to settle into the ground. Just notice how the pelvis feels. Release around the pelvis. So sometimes when we come into this position, we can still be holding on to quite a lot. So just allow for yourself to settle. And we're going to pulse by pushing the feet down into the ground and creating this movement, this jiggling essentially. Can you jiggle the spine up and down off the ground? Or against the ground rather. And you can take that jiggling into quite a fast-paced jiggle, noticing whether the chin rocks and draws inwards. If you've got a ponytail in the back there, it might be in the way, so just be mindful of that. Jiggling here and feeling into this space. So I would propose that being attached would suggest that we hold ourselves and brace ourselves by focusing on a rigid structure. So can you let go within your yoga? And we'll be working a lot with letting go, moving away from any dependence on anything external to validate our worth. So that's quite a big theme, it's quite an important theme. And release the jiggle, release that movement. And we're going to come into a pelvic tilt. So exhaling and inhaling through the nostrils, coming into your nasal breathing. We're going to rock and roll along the back of the pelvis. A very gentle action, flattening the lumbar and then creating space under the lumbar. So if you can't see that, I'm going to put my hands underneath the lumbar so you can see that you're squishing the hands against the floor as you flatten and releasing and creating a little bridge there as you release. So you've got this lovely pelvic tilt action, and that's akin to your pelvis being like a bowl of water that you sloosh down towards the knees and sloosh up towards the head. So you're freeing any tension there, really, really important. Maybe you can rock and roll and create circles here. Now this is quite subtle, difficult to see, as though you are creating circles around the back of that sacrum, so that tailbone. Can you feel that? Can you sense into that? It's very subtle. It's quite freeing, like a little dance. It's really quite lovely. And then we're going to come into our Dvipadapitham. So now we're bringing the pelvis off the ground and rocking up through all of the vertebrae, coming up through the thoracic and the clavicular spine, exploring the spine and mobilizing this area, freeing up any areas that become rigid, any areas that become tight. So this is great to prevent slip discs and things like that. Good for your posture. Rolling up and down the spine. Releasing anything that has become a bit tight, a bit congested throughout the day. And rolling the pelvis back down again. As we come up through our Dvipadipitham, I invite you to come into Setu Bandhasana by clasping the hands behind the buttocks, bringing the shoulder blades together and pushing through the legs here. So you've got this lovely supported Setu Bandhasana, making sure the knees are happy with a slight tension between the thighs, this internal rotation. Now, if your knees are happy to do so, let's see how it feels to lift the leg off the ground, exploring this here, spiraling into the heels, and then releasing the foot back and coming to the other side. What adjustments does the body make here to come into that space, coming down? And if this hasn't come into your lumbar, you can come through the other side and rotate the ankle. There's no need to straighten the knee, particularly here. Coming to the left side. Nice and strong here, pressing down through the foot that meets the ground and drawing that down, rolling the vertebra down to the ground and drawing yourself up into Apanasana, wind relieving pose. Give yourself a little bit of a cuddle. It's always good to give yourself a cuddle, rocking from side to side, massaging along the back body here. Lovely. Dropping that right foot down, we're coming in to thread the needle, so external rotation in the hip. Protecting the knee with that dorsiflexion. Bring the hands to the hip points. How does that feel? Before drawing the knees in towards your center, splaying out through the toes here. So those feet are awake. And bringing the hand behind the knee or behind the thigh, wherever feels comfortable. Rolling from side to side. How is this hip today? How does it feel? We may be coming into a pigeon later, so this is excellent prep. We don't want to force into any edges, allowing for yourself to roll over. We're going to roll over to the right side. So if the left leg is on top, to come into Jatara Parivriti, collapsing over to the side and bringing the hands out into a T shape. So we're crossing the legs as the legs draw over to the side and the gaze comes over to the left hand. Inhaling through, down into the rib cage, softening the belly, exhaling, allowing for the rotation to come about. Bringing the gaze back through center, rolling the legs up and drawing them back down. Coming to the other side, splaying, flaring out the foot here. Bring the hands to hip point and drawing the knees in. Breathing into these feet here, waking those feet up. And drawing the knees in. Wherever feels comfortable, there is going to be a sense of sensation, which may be strong. We're not forcing into anything, but simply letting go on the exhalation into the hip. Noticing if this moves up into the jaw. If the jaw becomes tight, releasing the jaw. Feeling into this side. How does this side feel compared to the other side? Perhaps it feels a bit tighter. Perhaps it feels more comfortable. Maybe labeling that without adding a judgment. And then drawing the knees over to the opposing side now. Bring the arms out to the T shape, keeping the shoulder blades down to the ground and gazing over to the right hand, the right finger. Breathing into the hip here. Inhaling, expanding around the rib cage, softening around the belly. Exhaling, allowing everything to draw inwards. If you haven't already done so, bring the gaze up towards the center, roll the legs up and out and release the knees in towards the body to make a tiny little ball, giving yourself a hug. Bring yourself into that sense of a singularity. We're going to explore our navel region, the solar plexus, that strength within. Assuming that you're okay with the flattening of the lumbar, as you inhale, we're going to expand the limbs out to the outer reaches. You can control the width and the extent that you take this. Exhaling, drawing yourself inwards. Inhale, expanding. Exhale, receiving. So there's this lovely pulsation with the breath. It's really fun to explore. There's no specific rigid shape that we have to force ourselves into. There's a sense of softness and fluidity. What kind of texture does it feel like you're moving through today? Can you move as though you're moving through water, fully supported? Do you feel like you're moving through some sludgy mud? Or perhaps you feel like you're moving through air. Drawing the knees in, and we're going to rock and roll to transition into our all fours. Let's go for 3 rolls before crossing the shins over and making that transition to flip the legs back or come back in your own fashion. Coming into all fours, spreading through the fingers. Maybe the first time you've come into all fours today. So spread through those fingers nice and wide, opening up the palms. Quickly spiraling around here, just moving backwards and forwards so the fingers move out to the outer edges. Our little exercises for RSI, really important. Spiraling the fingers towards the knees. How does that feel? Just opening up those little muscles a bit. And then flipping the hands so the fingers come into the midline. And then maybe flipping them upside down. Spreading through the tops of the hands. Lovely. And then bring them back to their neutral space. Maybe it feels like you can spread them much wider than before, bending the elbows and drawing your spine into neutral. The feet are flat down on the floor, and with an exhalation through nostrils, we come into your flexion, coming into your scared cat. The head hangs freely. Shake out the head. Inhale, coming through neutral. Pressing down through the fingers here. Exhale, opening up the heart space to the front of the mat. The chin is tucked in, drishti down between the hands. Inhaling, flowing through this movement. So we feel into this space as opposed to telling ourselves what to do. Inhale through your neutral. Exhale, feel that movement move through around the heart space. Inhaling back through center, coming into a sense of restraint around the front of the belly and the pelvis before we lift the right hand and the left leg off the ground to come into our bird dog. Breathing and releasing and following the breath. The breath is our anchor. The breath allows us to let go into this shape. Don't worry if you're feeling kind of rocky tonight. Just notice how you feel with no judgment. Inhaling over to the other side. Spreading through the big toe, reaching through to the middle finger. Inhaling and exhaling. If you need to come down into child's pose, if you're feeling particularly tired, please do come down into child's pose. If you begin to shake, it may be the case that you just need to restore tonight. As we come out into our reaching, we're going to exhale and draw the limbs to the outer edges. And then lengthen. So you're more like a salamander coming out of the sea here. Inhaling, drawing the hands back down, coming to the other side. Inhale. To the outer reaches. Exhale. Inhale. We may feel it into the outer edge of the hip here. Inhale, drawing the hands down. Let's bring the hips back and come into our child's pose. The knees are together and you settle the forehead down, obviously bringing the ground up if you need to. Coming into a very relaxed child's pose here. What can you let go of as you bring the forehead? Make that connection with the ground. Your Ajna chakra, that center of intuition, making contact with the earth. Now, if you haven't got any shoulder impingement, you can bring the hands to clasp around the back body. If that feels uncomfortable, bring your hands down and you can come into tripod. Coming into rabbit pose. So as the forehead touches down, we roll up onto the crown of the head, clasping the hands and allowing the shoulders to roll. Rolling back onto the forehead, feeling into that pressure. It's really lovely to have that sense of feedback. And opening up the shoulders, rolling back and through, Releasing the hands forwards. We're going to come into our plank. So you bring yourself into tabletop, spreading through the fingers. Cannot say that enough. Spread through the fingers, press down the fingertips. And as though you're not going to move your pelvis, you extend out the right leg, drawing the right leg in. Extend out through the left leg, and then maybe meeting with the legs together in your plank. Now, as we transition down to the floor, you can come through knees, chest, chin, or you can come through chaturanga. With both of those shapes, the elbows come down and through next to the rib cage, and you scoop yourself forwards, creating a little cushion for the face. So we're coming into crocodile. Let's shake out the hips. If there's any sense of work or tension left in the body here from coming down and through your chaturanga or your knees, chest, chin, you'll want to release this area. And then bring the face to the other side to rest the chin down, or the cheek rather, onto the other side to equalize that space. So for a moment, we're going to bring the hands underneath the shoulders and come into our Bhujangasana Cobra. Gazing the drishti down in between the hands, we're going to lift up through the chest, drawing those shoulder blades together. There's no need for an extreme shape here. Lovely. And then we're going to release. We're now going to come into Sphinx, which is slightly different in the sense that we have more structure supporting us. The hands come into this lovely Sphinx position with the parallel forearms spreading through the fingers, pressing through the fingers here. So you're really supported and strong. And the action is a wiggle. So can you wiggle the breastbone forwards and jiggle with the chin tucked in, coming into your Sphinx? How does that feel? Can you release? So you should feel fairly relaxed. Now we're going to bend one knee first, spreading through the toes, the dorsiflexion of the foot. Now, how does that feel into the knee? If the iliopsoas, which is that muscle around the front here, if it's tight, it will pull on the knee. So if you're feeling and experiencing that, you do not want to take this further than this action. Let's come to the other side and experience how that feels. And there are little tweaks that you can make, moving the leg out to the side to maybe take the pressure off the knee. Okay, so we're working towards bow. Bow pose, Dhanurasana, involves the thoracic opening, the shoulders coming back towards the back line of the body, a release and lengthening down through the front of the hips, the hip flexors. So you can explore bringing the hands to the outside of the ankle, noticing how that feels in the knee. Bringing the hand to the inside of the ankle, again, notice how that is in the knee. There may be a preferred hold within your body, there is for mine. Come to the other side, Sphinx arms, bending the knee. Can you get hold of the ankle? It may be the case that you need to just work with this, especially if you're very strong in the hips. If you've been doing lots of squats, for instance, it can tighten that area quite strongly. And then the next stage for your bow is to bring the feet in toward the buttocks. Explore how it feels opening the chest as though you're coming into Bhujangasana. Now, I find it helpful to flare the feet into dorsiflexion. I would also recommend holding onto the ankles, not the feet. And then as you kick back, you're lifting into your bow, into your Dhanurasana. Now, if you're breathing into a soft belly, you can begin to rock. It's just an added feature. Breathing and rocking. It's lovely, but it feels quite strange. Gazing down in front of you and release. Rocking the hips from side to side. And we're going to push through and back into child's pose, coming into flexion. So there's quite a lot of spinal extension taking place in Dhanurasana. So you want to allow for the back body to open, expand. Your counter pose is very important. Coming into child's pose. Breathing here. And from that place, we're going to come back into our tabletop. Spreading through the fingers And exploring how it feels again to straighten the legs. Now, if you have any issues with your elbows or your wrists, you may want to stay with this. Otherwise, we're coming into forearm stance to work with forearm plank. So with the arms in parallel, spreading through the hands, you have that as an option, or you can clasp the hands for your V shape, depending on the support that you want today. So choosing that option there, we explore straightening the legs out one by one and noticing how that feels, because this is slightly different around the shoulder girdle and it does involve a certain amount of strength. Breathing, perhaps bringing the knees off the ground and playing with being in your forearm plank, pressing down through the arms there. The sense of wrap, gazing down at the hands, nice long necks. There's no need for you to look at the screen like I am. It's not so great for my neck. Feeling into the toes and bringing the feet back down. Now you may want to play with that, or indeed you can come up into dolphin, which is similar but more of a downward dog action. So adjusting your arms, coming into another position if that works for you. We're going to tuck the toes under. Now, firstly, as we come back and sink back into the hips, feel how that moves up into the shoulders. It may feel quite lovely. Dropping the head, drawing the hip bones up towards the ceiling. Make sure the crown of the head hangs freely. Pushing down through the forearms, hopefully you can hear me, and feeling that strength within. Can you let go into this action? Inhaling and exhaling through the nostrils and bringing yourself down to come into child's pose. You have an option to come back up into your dolphin if that works for you. If you're in the mood for dolphin, it can be such a wonderful thing to work with. If you're finding your energy is low, you may want to just come back into your child's pose and draw yourself into that tiny ball to release and relax and absorb the prana into the body. Because in our yoga practice, we're really building upon the pranic energy, the vital energy within the body. Within a disordered body, there's a really interesting visual in one of the books. All of the prana is released outside of the body. So we're maintaining homeostasis by absorbing this energy, creating and cultivating the energy within. Coming into your tiny little child's pose. Lovely. And we're going to lift the hips off the ground. Bring the arms forwards. We're coming into puppy pose. The hips are released up towards the ceiling. The heart space sinks down. And there's never a good place for the chin here. See if you can come into this space without the face becoming difficulty. Releasing around the heart space here, and you begin to feel into the back of the heart space. It's a lovely stretch, a lovely heart opener. And then padding the hands back towards the knees, we're going to tuck the toes under and bring ourselves up into broken toe Vajrasana. If it's too sharp and the pain is too much into the feet here, take the pressure off and move forwards and explore the toes in this position. Otherwise, bring those toes out and the hands to heart center and utilize the exhalation to breathe into your feet. So again, if there are extremely sharp sensations, jabbing sensations coming about, and this is painful, you'll want to ease out. If it's uncomfortable, this is something we're really trying to work with on the exhalation. Riding the waves of the breath as you inhale and as you exhale. Allowing for the breath to come in around the belly, around the hara. As you inhale, as a softening and expansion. As you exhale, sense of drawing inwards. Softening the bellies, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing around the face, with an inner smile. And then drawing the hands forwards, exploring your downward dog, remembering that you can take most of the weight into the legs as you drop the crown of the head down and release the hips up. Inhaling, lifting up onto the toes. Exhale, draw the heels down. Spiraling through the fingers here, pressing down through the fingers. How does that change things in your downward dog? It makes a huge difference all the way up the arm into the shoulder girdle. Maybe spiraling the fingers to the outer edges, noticing how that feels. Shaking the head out, really important. Shake the head out, release that area. Lovely. We're going to lift up through the right leg, coming into three-legged dog. And release the knee in towards the nose. Inhaling, coming into a little flow of your own. Releasing into the three-legged dog, coming to the outside edge of the elbow here. Inhale, three-legged dog. Exhale, across the body this time. Lovely little rotation. Maybe you can hold that. Inhale, lifting up through, and exhale the foot down, coming to the other side. Three-legged dog. You can come into child's pose at any point. Exhaling, knee to nose or thereabout. Inhale, three-legged dog. Exhale, outside edge of elbow or thereabouts. Inhale, three-legged dog, crossing over the body this time, holding as you rotate, bit of strengthening here, and release into your three-legged dog. Lovely. Draw the foot down. Option to come into child's pose for a moment, sinking down with the knees wide in a wide leg child's pose. So you've got a similar action coming in around the front of the body as though you're coming into puppy. Maybe you can experience that. Releasing into that space. Lovely. Tucking the toes under and drawing the hips up to your downward dog. This time as we release the right leg out into three-legged dog, we're going to scoop the knee in towards the nose, exhaling, bring the foot forwards into your high lunge. Drop the back knee, flatten the foot, create some padding. You can fold your mat over for some padding for the back knee. And you want the space between the front heel and the back knee to be fairly wide, so the iliopsoas can lengthen as we sink down without crunching into lumbar. So draw the tailbone down to the ground, lifting up into your low lunge. Breathing into soft bellies, feeling that opposing Apana energy and the Udana energy coming up through the body. Now from this space, you can use the hands and bring them down, but I think we can explore tucking the toes under, lifting up into high lunge. How does that feel? And then drawing the hands down into the inside of the foot here. So I'm just going to release the mat. We're going to come into lizard, allowing for the leg now to come to the outside of the elbow. Hopefully you can see that roughly. It's quite strong. I'm not going to say let's come down onto elbows, because that might be a little bit too deep. Exploring how that feels before tucking the toes in slightly more so we get more support, lifting ourselves up into high lunge, breathing into this space. And we're going to transition, interestingly, into Virabhadrasana 3. Little bit of trust, a little bit of letting go here. Trust your strength as you draw yourself forwards to come into Virabhadrasana 3 or aeroplane. Now, if you have a room divider in the way, you won't be able to bring the arms out in front, but you can focus on bringing the hands down by the side of the body to explore how that feels, and then drop the foot back to come into high lunge. Trying to find your way back into that space, kind of tricky. And explore coming forwards into Virabhadrasana 3 again. You've mapped the movement in the body, you know what you're doing. And then release the leg up. Now the foot can just be off the ground slightly if you're working with your balance. Maybe it's just hovering, bending that front knee. Maybe it's coming back further. I'm quite wobbly tonight. And then draw that foot back and find its way into your high lunge again. Let yourself settle. Let all of that energy settle down into the body. Now from this position here, you may want to bring the foot forwards to come into more of a Virabhadrasana 1 rather than a high lunge, coming into a safer, more supported area into your Warrior 1. So this time, slightly more straightforward, we're going to flow between 2 points coming into Vrksasana at the front of the mat. The leg comes to meet wherever it needs to meet, and the hands come to heart center for a balance. Breathing here, I'm just going to move the screen again because I'm headless. Coming into your Vrksasana, and then using that sense of proprioception, I'm going to step back into Virabhadrasana 1. Releasing the shoulders, smiling, perhaps, and then bringing ourselves forwards into Vrksasana. Breathing and flowing. I'm so wobbly tonight, it's ridiculous. Just notice how that is for you today. And drawing yourself back into Virabhadrasana 1. We're now going to transition back into your downward dog. So bring the hands to the front of the foot, scoop the leg back, downward facing dog. Option to come into child's pose if you like. Breathing here. Scooping the leg up through three-legged dog, bringing the knee in to your high lunge, but dropping the knee, creating some padding if you want, and flattening the top of the foot down. So you've got the heel at the front directly under the knee. There's this lovely long space in between the heel and the knee, so the iliopsoas can sink. When you've found that stability, we can lift up through the arms into your low lunge, relaxing the shoulders. Lovely. We're then going to make that transition, but you can bring the hands down to the ground by tucking the toes under and lifting up into high lunge. From this space, we bring the hands into lizard. So on the inside of the foot, release and let go through the hips here, without feeling like we need to come down to elbows. Maybe drawing that back foot in to create a more solid base of support. We bring ourselves up into high lunge. Now make any adjustments that you need to. Perhaps the back foot needs to come in slightly, because we know that we're transitioning forward, so we want quite a lot of strength in the front foot here. If you want to flow the arms back as you come forwards, please feel free to do so. So we pivot into Virabhadrasana 3, Warrior 3, finding our balance and drawing ourselves back into high lunge. How does that feel as you transition forwards, finding the balance, becoming more and more as we repeat the action of where our body is in space? Lovely. One more time, if you like, coming forwards into your Virabhadrasana 3, keeping that hip point down if it flares, and drawing the foot back. Lovely. Then we're going to make our transition that may feel simpler to come forwards into Vrksasana, a position of your choice. The leg comes up quite naturally, and then bringing the foot back with the breath flowing between 2 points. Now, what is the texture of this movement as we flow? How does it feel to you? Does it feel like you're moving through mud, air, or indeed water? As we draw ourselves between these 2 points, breathing and allowing for the iliopsoas to lengthen. So just facing you for a moment, coming up through your Virabhadrasana 1, but with the heel off the ground. Lovely. And then as we come through into our Vrksasana, you can hold that for a moment. And then bring the leg down through the center to come into Tadasana. If I stand here, you can see me. So Tadasana may feel quite interesting today to bring the inner seam of the foot together. So make a very small point of contact with the floor. Now, how does that feel in your body? Drawing your attention up through the feet, spreading through the toes, lifting the toes up off the ground, maybe spreading those toes out, flaring the little toe. Lovely. Bring the attention up through the shins, noticing how the knees feel. Are you clenching the knees? Can you release the knees here? Relax. Bring the attention up to the hips, releasing around the hips, softening the belly. So you can't see, but my belly is sticking out here. It's all good. And relaxing around the shoulders, tucking the chin in, releasing around the back of the head. Tadasana. From this point, we're going to transition back down to the floor. Now, you may want to come through, lifting up the heels, coming through and down. But if you want to explore how the hips feel, Malasana may be the way to come down. You just want the knees to track the line of the toes so we don't do any damage. Coming through, sinking through and making adjustments into Malasana, our squat. Finding the position that works for you, because we're pushing the elbows into the knees here. We don't want to create any undue pressure into the knees, of course. Lifting up through the spine, softening around the heart space. Finding that point of balance, tucking the chin in for lovely long necks. Breathing here, so whichever position you're in is the right position for you today. And we're going to swivel from this point. So I'm going to swivel sideways into a Navasana, coming down onto the sitting bones. Drawing yourself down to the sitting bones, bringing the shins up to parallel, lifting up through the breastbone, boat pose. Holding this as we breathe, and you can exhale and draw the knees in. Inhale with work with straightening, inhaling and exhaling. As though pumping pranic energy into our bodies. And then from this position, we're going to swivel the legs over to one side and then swivel onto the sitting bones to the other side. Again, I'm going to swap round so you can see me. So you can use your hands on the ground, or you can find this movement by rocking and rolling onto the sitting bones. Now from this position, we're going to come into pigeon. Now you do know that with pigeon, obviously it's quite strong, you can come into mermaid. So exploring mermaid can be useful as we rock and roll. And then from mermaid, you can swivel again into mermaid on the other side. So working with mermaid first of all, because it's a gentler hip movement, observing the knees, how do the knees feel? And we're going to get hold of our blankets because we're going to need a blanket for some extra support. You could use a small bolster. And I'm going to suggest a little flat bolster made out of the blanket. So from this action here, we're going to roll into our pigeon. So you may want to move the right leg first to come into an angle. And as you can see, I'm rotating the pelvis here. There's a sense of opening around the front of the hip as I roll through into pigeon. Now this padding here comes underneath the pelvis to allow for the front of the pelvis to settle down on something that's got some height. In terms of the front leg, you see a lot of trying to flatten the front of the shin against the front of the mat. It's not necessary. The angle can be dependent on your hips, and you may want to bring the foot in and under the hip point. We want the knee to feel fairly happy, very happy. The foot here is not in dorsiflexion. That's really important to remember. Then we're going to sink and settle into our pigeon at the front here. Rocking and rolling into hips, releasing and letting go. And the hips are said to hold a lot of emotional energy. And as much as it is lovely to work with the hips, we also need to be cautious not to overstretch our ligaments and move into sacroiliac issues. So using a sense of attention and awareness, let's protect ourselves here. There's no need to go into anything that's too strong or too intense. Now, if you're really happy in this position, you may want to explore bending the knee. Again, the key thing here is to notice how that is in the knee. How does that feel? And it may be the case that you can prop yourself up into king pigeon. How does that change your knee? Now, if the knee is happy, we can explore getting hold of the ankle. You open up around the front of the chest, king pigeon. Gazing down at the front of the mat. Releasing that foot if you came into that position. And then we're going to swivel and roll out of this side, coming through mermaid. And we're going to change onto the other side. So moving your roll, we have mermaid. Make sure that you're on your other side. You'll probably feel that as you come into your mermaid. We're going to swivel around, drawing the front of the pelvis down towards the mat and bring some padding. I'm really loving the padding underneath here. It's just that extra support as you roll into your pelvis. Again, the foot is where it needs to be to protect the knee. There is no need for you to put your foot out here like we so often do in some yoga asana, thinking that that's what we have to strive for. That's a little bit of attachment to an aesthetic. So we need to draw ourselves inwards to that sense of interoception, listening to the body. Coming into a forward fold here, releasing into the ground, releasing the neck, releasing around the hips. And I think pigeon is one of those asana that's a bit like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. Breathing into soft bellies. For those of you who want to explore how it feels to move the leg up off the ground, maybe try that when you're in the forward fold position before coming into your king pigeon as you prop yourself up. Noticing how it feels to bring the hand around the ankle. Now, this is all exploration and it's all very much dependent on how you're feeling, what sensations arise. Coming into your king pigeon here, opening around the front of the thoracic. So if there's no ability in the shoulders and that mobility is constricted, it means that this is going to be a very difficult position to get hold of. So there's a lot of length coming in around the front of the hip and the front of the chest. Releasing, relaxing, drawing yourself forwards. We're going to roll out mermaid-wise, coming to your center point. So come back into mermaid. It's going to draw the knees in towards the chest and give yourself a little hug. Again, give yourself a little flexion. Rounding the back, allow for a rounding to take place. Release and inhale into the back line of the body. Inhaling and exhaling. Dropping the head down to the knee. Lovely. So you might want to roll onto the spine here to give it a bit of a massage. After that fairly strong extension in pigeon, rolling down, feeling into the back, giving it a little bit of feedback. We're going to take our props, if we have a bolster or a rolled up blanket, and come into a restorative thoracic opening position, which looked like what it looked like at the beginning of the session. If you have bricks, you can pop them underneath this one thing to lie on. Now, if you do not have a bolster and you do not have bricks, you can roll your blanket and come into a slightly different position. And you're going to put that underneath the thoracic spine. If you have something like a bolster or a rolled up bolster that you made earlier, Blue Peter style, you may want to bring a block underneath or some padding, a cushion or a folded blanket or a folded towel underneath here so you don't get this bolster bulging into the lower back. If you're coming for this one as well, you'll want to have some padding on top of the bolster to protect the neck so the chin can draw inwards. So I'm just having a look at you to see If you've just got a blanket, Ella, what have you got? Blanket, super. So you're going to go for this option. Hopefully you can see it. You're going to position the shoulder blades over the blanket and drape. If you've got a cushion, you can put a cushion underneath the head, and the arms can drape above your rolled blanket or below. You can explore those options. You're opening up this heart space. If you're coming into the bolster version, we have some padding underneath the back of the neck, and you rest yourself. It's like a little recliner. It's amazing. And you can have the knees bent like this, or you can come into Baddha Konasana. And you can come into Baddha Konasana if you like with the rolled blanket, Ella. The feet come together if you're comfortable. Otherwise, come into the bent knee option. The main key thing here is that you have some support just under the rib cage. And that area of the heart space that so often becomes closed around the front body for whatever reason, posture, it can be protective instinct, it can be the sofas that we sit on, it can be the computers that we type at. You know, there's not a lot of furniture out there that really prevents us from coming into that movement. This is doing the opposing thing. The shoulder blades draw together as though they can zip together and open. Now, if this feels really vulnerable, there may be a sense of not wanting to come into this. You just notice that within your body, because, you know, there are reasons. Though we don't need to go into any dialogue with ourselves to what that might be. Practicing absolute self-care here. And this restorative pose allows us to let go by moving us out of any habituated holding patterns. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the many things that I've been reading about in terms of our obstacle to our practice, this klesha that comes up within our daily lives, within our yoga practice. Now, one and the same, really. So from the Bhagavad Gita, in terms of this attachment, I'll read you a little bit of an excerpt. Obviously, feel free to just let my words roll over you. This is your practice. From contemplating the objects of the senses, an attachment to them is born. From attachment, desire arises, and from desire is produced anger. From anger comes illusion, and from illusion, confusion of memory. From confusion of memory, intelligence is destroyed, and from loss of intelligence, one is lost. So the flame of desire that causes addiction to pleasure, this discourages you from leaving your comfort zone for more evolved territory. So we can become attached to our comforts, attached to our homes, our heating, our cushions, our sofas, our television, our Netflix. But what does that do to impinge our personal growth? And that's where attachment comes in. We can become attached to specific experiences, expecting those experiences to be the same over and over, but they are often not the same. As the Buddha says, you can only lose what you cling to. So it's not about neglecting or rejecting the thing we feel appreciation for, but truly enjoying what we have while we have them. It's not about avoiding any sort of pleasure, but realizing the impermanent nature of pleasure and pain, and being observant to our thoughts and behaviors. By acknowledging the vulnerability and uncertainty of life, we can find internal freedom. So on a personal note, I think we've probably all been there, you can become fixated on a specific thing because you feel that thing is going to bring you some sort of joy, some sort of nourishment, perhaps. It could be the expectation of the amazing experience that you want to have from having a shiny new kitchen, or it can be the expectation that we have on our yoga practice to make us feel a certain way. And as soon as we have an expectation on one thing or another, we are bound to be disappointed. So this really touches into that, to release ourselves from expectation and attachment to a specific outcome. That is where the liberation lies. So we can move away from external validation into something inward, nurturing, with more subsistence, more integrity. I'm just noticing how you feel in this shape, in this restorative pose, letting go around the shoulders, around the heart space, around the hips, just a little, not too much. So we don't need to be in denial about the pleasure that we can experience through experiences and things and objects, but we do not want to cling too heavily to those things. For instance, I had a mug from Copenhagen once upon a time that my sister bought me when she was out there, and it was my favorite mug. I loved this mug. I get very attached. And this mug had coffee in it, and it was put on a windowsill by the bathroom while I was washing a car one summer. And then I went into the bathroom to go to the toilet and opened the window, and the mug landed on the floor and smashed, and I was so angry. I was completely mortified, completely beyond what really should be expected from such a small thing being broken. And if you move through life in this way, you tend to, it just heightens a sense of upset and anger towards things. So what can we do to release ourselves from that? We can lower our expectations. You still have high values, but you can lower your expectations on the external. It's an interesting practice to try on the mat and off the mat. Now, in terms of the position that you're in, you'll want to move off your props with a sense of comfort and ease, whether it is releasing yourself upwards or rolling to the side, coming off your many props. And sadly, because I don't think any of us have prop elves waiting by the side to move everything for us, we can bring ourselves down to the ground, coming in semi-supine, and notice what changes have occurred in the body. Breathing into the back line of the body here. And if it feels comfortable to do so, you can come into Shavasana with straightened legs, or you can use your rolled up blanket behind the knees. You can use some padding behind the head. You can use a blanket over the body. You're going to have 6 minutes or so to consolidate the practice, allowing for the body to settle into the ground, utilizing gravity. If there's any pulling around the hips into the back of the spine, maybe less likely after some of the hip work we've done, you can bend the knees. That will change things. If the chin is pointing up towards the ceiling, bring the hands to the base of the neck, stroking up to the back of the skull, tucking the chin in and releasing the back of the neck. The same thing can be done with the shoulders, but considering we've just done that restorative pose, it's probably less likely to be needed. So I'm going to draw myself up into a seated position, stay down on the floor, allowing for the body to relinquish control, for the mind to relinquish control, to simply let go of anything that does not serve you. Relaxing around the the facial muscles around the eyes, around the temples, around the jaw. The tongue tucking up into the top of the palate, releasing around the skull and softening around the back of the neck. I'm going to read a poem to you, but feel free to allow for my words to just roll over you. If your awareness is going elsewhere, that's fine. But if you do find yourself coming back to the monkey mind, back to thinking, back to listing, back to a dialogue, you may want to focus on your breath. Simply saying inwardly, I'm breathing in, and I'm breathing out on the exhalation. So I'm going to read a poem I love called Everything is Waiting for You by David White. I first heard this poem on a retreat up in Norfolk years ago when I was trying to stop breastfeeding my youngest. So we did cold turkey and I got mastitis and had to wear cabbage in my bra. So, your mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the thing hidden, the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand arrays, the swelling presence and the chaos crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into conversation. The kettle is singing, even if, as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. Dropping pretense and expectation and attachment to outcome. Everything is waiting for you. Allow your awareness to move as it moves freely through the body, outside of the body, below the body. Begin to touch into your inhalation, noticing as you inhale through the nostrils, the temperature of the breath. And at the end of the following sound, I invite you to roll over onto your right hand side in a fetal position that's comfortable for you. Allowing for the weight of the body to sink down to the mat. And at the end of the following sound, grounding down through the arm, pushing yourself upright, maybe keeping the eyes closed if you feel comfortable. And with that sense of softness, make any adjustments as you come into an upright position. Noticing the weight of the body as it grounds down, that sense of apana, and the upward rising energy of udana. Let's bring the hands together to close the practice, creating heat. And then rubbing the back of the hands to cup the palms over the eye sockets. Now, if you'd like to flutter the eyelids open, looking into the palms here, noticing any sense of residue of light or pattern. Let's bring the hands down through the midline, bowing in acknowledgement of one another in the space in between. Namaste. So quite a fast-paced practice this evening. Packing it all in, 60 minutes. Do feel free to unmute yourselves.